Today's video dedication is for Whiskey Jack. Talion versus Hamza, partners Ishai and Rayhan, and Runo Stromkirk. Well, plenty of mana available to us, so that is going to be a turn 2 commander, and hopefully we can draw some cards, so we'll try keeping that. I said turn 2 commander, I meant turn 2 Midnight Clock into a turn 3 commander. Okay, we draw into a Force of Will, so we've definitely got a means of protecting our commander now. Underground Sea, and we'll hold up and offer you can't refuse, just in case one of our opponents goes off here. A turn 1 Ozolith for the counters player, we will allow into play. No play from the Hamza player, and we draw into a Wound Reflection, so I think we're going for the Midnight Clock here. Start getting the counters on that from turn 2 is pretty good. And we'll still be able to hold up and offer you can't refuse. And the partner player now getting down an Iron Apprentice. Arcane Signet for Hamza, didn't get that down before turn 3 thanks to the tap lands here. And we're going to be on 4 counters on the Midnight Clock, so another couple of turn cycles with this and we will be shuffling. And obviously drawing a fresh grip with that. Okay, gets us into a Notion Thief, so I think an island is okay. We do have Urborg in the deck, so might fix all our black mana at some point. Get down our commander Talion. And during the 1v1 playthrough with Talion I named 2, and I think we're fine to name 2 on Magic Online in multiplayer as well. It tends to be a lot spikier than you might see in paper. I think in paper a lot of the times you'll want to name 3 with Talion. We do have Telepathy, the enchantment, in the deck, and that will allow us to look at our opponent's hands and could give us an idea of what to name with regards to Talion and the copies that we have in this deck. So straight away, seeing a 3-drop, that is a Frantic Search for the other Dimir player. Discarding with that a Junkwinder and a Darkwater Catacombs. So must have other lands available. A Runo Stromkirk into play now. And then obviously putting the Junkwinder on top of the library with the commander. Alright, was expecting to see another commander there, but the partner player missing a land drop unfortunately. Another tap land from Hamza, a Hideaway card in Windbrisk Heights. And now we see a Sculpting Steel, so maybe comes down as a copy of Midnight Clock. Keeping hold of an offer you can't refuse, because we might want to exile it with Force of Will. We're about to refill our hand anyway. Of course, it's a plus counters deck over here as well, so making a copy of the Ozolith. If he draws into his own Ozolith, he won't be able to play it. Haven't drawn a single card to the Talion though. Maybe should have named 3. But during our next turn, we're going to be drawing with the Midnight Clock. Okay, and there's a Feed the Swarm, so if we go Feed the Swarm and then we'll be able to flash in the Notion Thief, that should be okay. And then we can still counter something with the Force of Will. I don't want to see this thing flip round so quickly, so we'll blow that up. And then we'll swing into the left as well, seeing as how this player's going to be looking at us anyway. Should mention as well that this deck is meant to be like a bleed type deck. It's not drain because we don't gain any life for a lot of it, but there's cards in here that will slowly bleed our opponent out, and yeah, obviously that's meant to go with our commander. Our opponents will lose life to this and draw us a card, hopefully, but hasn't happened yet, and obviously not getting into the bleed effects either. A Sol Ring for our opponent is fine. We obviously know he's just drawn into that Junkwinder. And Runo Stromkirk into play again. So he's going to have to set up whatever card he wants to put on top of his library. Could have a Brainstorm effect or something like that. Does not have a creature card to put from graveyard on top of his library. And we're keeping hold of our Force of Will to counter something that will go after the Midnight Clock, maybe even our commander, because we do really want to draw a fresh grip here, really. And I'm hoping that the partner player manages to make a 3rd land here. He does. So seeing Kami of Whispered Hopes a turn later, unfortunately. And our opponent might want to throw the Iron Apprentice round to the left here, but decides against it. May have wanted to put a plus counter on the Kami of Whispers. So we get our penultimate counter on the Hamza player's turn on the Midnight Clock. And that is our first trigger from the commander with a Voltaic Servant. At the beginning of your end step, untap a target artifact. See what we draw into here. Okay, Seagate Restoration, I don't mind shuffling away with the clock. Not that we'll have a choice next turn. Then drawing a card by sacrificing the Fair Basilica. So going down a mana already. Then it's a 0 mana Welding Jar, sacrifice it to regenerate an artifact. Could have gone for the Notion Thief in response to the card draw, of course, but we'll let our opponent have it. Sacrifice this, and you can search for a basic, then shuffle. 3 cards left in our opponent's hand. Might be that he's built some kind of Cheerios variant. I'm not sure how that goes with Hamza though. Alright, so in response to the Voltaic Servant, going on the artifact over here, the Arcane Signet you would assume, we will go for the Notion Thief. And now putting regeneration on an artifact, the Traveller's Amulet. This is happening during our upkeep. Then sacrificing the Traveller's Amulet. Search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Yeah, regenerate doesn't work like that, it only works on destroy. So when they sacrifice it, it will not re-enter play or anything like that. Anyway, going down a mana, the Midnight Clock could have floated it for mana actually, but we get a fresh grip here. And thankfully do get into some more lands. So maybe Expedition Map for an Urborg this turn would be good. Although Sakashima naming mana value 3 could be cool as well. Don't have any counter magic backup now, annoyingly, although it seems as though our opponents don't have anything. Go for the Sakashima, onto the Talion, and we'll say 3 this time on a slightly lower powered game, I think. Then it can be the Expedition Map, and we can get down a tap land at the end of one of our opponent's turns. Probably crack this for the Urborg, like I said. So I'll turn in this time against the Hamza player, land some commander damage over there. Now Runo Stromkirk going to reveal the top card of his library potentially, and we'll see if that gets transformed or not. Revealing a rapid hybridization with that, we now do not have the counter magic to protect our commander, but we've at least got 2 of those in play now. Bajuka Bog comes down, exiling a graveyard. Probably should go after Hamza if we fear that there's some Cheerio shenanigans going on. I do wonder if people hold off spells and don't want to cast them into Talion. You know, like they keep taking the 2 damage from Solemn Simulacrum over and over again to not give you the card draw. I wonder if people will play around Talion. I don't think I would bother personally. And speaking of which, the Henny going to trigger twice, one for the 2 power or 2 toughness, once for the 3 mana value as well. So we will drain our opponent or bleed our opponent twice and draw 2 cards. Getting into some means of protection would be really good, although there's a Windfall which goes very nice with Sir Conrad. Mithril Coat isn't half bad either. Now it might be our opponent's holding on to the rapid hybridization for when we crack the Scalding Tarn, assuming that we've got a Swan Song or something like that to counter it with. So maybe it's not worth cracking the Scalding Tarn until our turn. A Teething Wormlet for the counters player over here. And then throwing a Golem into that with Modular 3. The Teething Wormlet does have Death Touch and triggers for the first time, gaining them a life and putting a plus counter on itself. So Voltaic Servant at the end step going to untap the Arcane Signet again, and we'll see if we can spot this rapid hybridization from our opponent. Well, our opponent allows us to untap, so apparently it would have been safe to get down the Watery Grave in tap there. I think we need to stop taking so much life to the Ancient Tomb, so I'll go for the Urborg now. And that will allow us to tap down the fetches for life as well. Or tap them down for black, I should say. Not take any more life. And we won't feel too bad if we draw into Cabal Coffers now, so throw down the Urborg. And yeah, I think we're fine going for Swiftfoot Boots here. And then we'll be able to hold up the Mithril Coat as well. It's going to be a bit suspicious that we're not equipping the Swiftfoot Boots. Our opponents will just assume that we've got counter magic held up, I think. So let's go down the middle at our opponent and show that we're spreading the damage around here. Not doing too well on the bleeding front, but hopefully we can get down Sir Conrad the Grim for that next turn. And we'll be able to actually go Sir Conrad into a Windfall. Obviously it would be an absolute optimal play to go for the Cyclonic Rift first and have our opponents put all their stuff back and then wheel it. And that would add on some more command attacks, but yeah, we'll see what we're able to do here. All depends on if our opponents interfere with us or not. Still not seeing that removal spell. Now revealing to us a quest for Ula's Temple. Now seeing that Junk Winder from our opponent. So we're gonna have to be careful of seeing tokens. But we've really managed to hold him off on transforming his commander. It would have been a really quick transform that, so yeah, luckily managed to hold him off that. Obviously during the last turn as well we could have gone for Windfall into the Notion Thief, and that would have had our opponents lose their entire hands. They would have had no cards in hand and we would have drawn a whole bunch. Not really looking to do that in a game like this where it's looking a bit more battle cruiser. Elenda the Dusk Rose coming in from the partner player anyway. Yeah, it seems like a bit of a spiky play when, I mean, I've been burned before for going easy on my opponents, but I do like to try and judge each table with each game that passes by, and yeah, Yeah, this doesn't seem like too powerful a one. Certainly don't want to be curb stomping my opponents. Also, from a content perspective, obviously, we see Magic Online players scooping like crazy at the littlest of things, so I think having them discard their entire hand to Notion Thief Windfall is definitely something that they would scoop over, and maybe justifiably. A Hamza, Guardian of Arashin. So just missing the middle player's commanders at the moment. I will say our opponents are doing quite a nice job of dodging our commanders. The Talion is going to trigger on a mere welder now. So gets bled for 2 and will draw us another card into Necropotence we certainly don't need. Triggers the Teething Wormlet, which is now a 3/3 with Death Touch, pretty damn good for just 1 mana. And then sacrificing another land in the Terrace, that will search for a basic, put it onto the battlefield tapped. And I think we will just attempt to get down the Mithril Coat here. Could be that our opponent blows up the commander in response. Although he's passing through priority, I might have missed something here. He might not have the rapid hybridization in his hand. I'm sure that he revealed it with his commander though. Well, we managed to land indestructible on our commander, so I don't mind that. Probably just going to put the Swiftfoot Boots on the Notion Thief then. I'll give my opponents a chance to deal with the board state here. I'll go Cyclonic Rift at the end of the next turn cycle. And then we can set up Sir Conrad the Grim into a Windfall. So we're giving them every chance here. Alright, that is a Professor Onyx. We will get down some blue mana. We're a little bit shy on that. Swiftfoot Boots onto Notion Thief. And that again is allowed. So yeah, we're just holding up the Cyclonic Rift, I think. We'll hold back blockers, because I want to be quite careful with the life totals. We're at 27, but we do have an Ancient Tomb and some fetches, so yeah, it might be that somehow we're not able to land the Cyclonic Rift. We do have a blue player that we're up against. Going to reveal another card, the Runo. And this time it's just an island. The chances that you'll hit that right off the top isn't very likely. You need to be stacking the top of your deck, really. Getting down the quest for Ula's Temple, first of all. And then deciding not to swing in with his 5/6, just holding everything back, as I feel as though everyone is going to. But if the blue player decides to counter the Cyclonic Rift, which he surely will if he's got counter magic, that's 1 less counter spell for the Windfall next turn at least. Awesome. I forgot this card was on Magic Online now. It only came on a few weeks ago, and first time I'm seeing Saw in half. I need to introduce that into some decks. 3 mana, so it triggers the Talion. Yeah, it turns out 3 mana during more casual games is the number to go for, like I said. It's targeting the Iron Apprentice, by the way. So that gets us into another land in Reliquary Tower. And that did have a plus counter on it, so it will put a counter on the Ozolith, and then brings in a couple of versions of itself, each 2 2s, or 3 3s. They've got 2 plus counters on them. And then it's a plus counter on Glenalendra, or it will be 2 plus counters thanks to the Kami making additional counters. 2 counters on the Ozolith as well. Then the Iron Apprentice trigger from Dying to the Soaring Hearth puts 2 plus counters with its trigger onto the Yaheni. So plenty of plus counters to go around here. Unfortunately, none on the Kami, so no additional mana being generated there. But one of the copies being sacrificed now to Yaheni, so that will put multiple plus counters on the Kami here, and multiple counters on the Ozolith. So the Ozolith now up to 5 plus counters on it. Alenda up to 4. The Iron Apprentice being sacrificed puts 3 counters on the Kami, and Yaheni gains Indestructible. Then sacrificing another copy to the Yaheni again. Cyclonic Rift deals with any Glenalendra shenanigans quite nicely. This assumes that we can get it through though. Now 8 counters on the Ozolith. Glenalenda now has 9 counters, and then the Ozolith at the beginning of combat will put all its plus counters onto the Kami, so that is going to tap for a hell of a lot of mana now, just as soon as I say that it's not tapping for any mana. And holding back, even with the lifelinker. Might have wished that he'd taken the extra life while he could, as soon as he sees the Rift. A greater good from our opponent, I don't mind seeing, not with a Notion Thief in play. A Champion of Lamholt this time allows us into a Dimir Signet. Our opponent sacrificing the Alenda is really good because it will draw us a bunch of cards, that greater good, thanks to the Notion Thief, but it'll also get the trigger out of the way with Alenda, so that we can wipe the board of tokens. So Champion of Lamholt is going to get a bunch of plus counters here and make the Yaheni unblockable. 23 plus counters on the Champion, by the way. Alright, so our opponent, realising his mistake, gets down Ishai at the end of the turn. It obviously drawn us a hell of a lot of cards here. And with a rift incoming as well, it's not looking too good for our opponents. We do not have free counter magic available to us. It's noteworthy that we've drawn into Machine God's Effigy as well, which is another means of copying our commander. A lot of people are going with the whole mirror box thing so that you can remove legendary from your commander. From all your creatures, saying the legendary rule doesn't matter. I think that's a bit too clunky of a play around, especially for Magic Online, which tends to be a faster meta. I'd rather just play cards like this that give you the effect, but you don't have to remove legendary from your commander before you play all your other spells, like your clone effects, because, like I said, it does get pretty clunky at that point. You have to not only have your 4-mana commander in play, but you have to have it not be legendary, and then you can have the cards in your hand be relevant. Anyway, Machaos the Lunarch into play. That has X plus counters on it, which equals 8. And then the Mere Welder, exile an artifact from a graveyard. And they are going after the Iron Apprentice. Our opponents are at hardly any cards in hand anyway, so it might be that they don't scoop to the Windfall here from the Notion Thief. Yeah, this player is being quite valiant. I mean, getting your board wiped and then discarding your entire hand is yeah, a bit different, isn't it? So, yeah, I do wonder if we're making the right play for the video here, but we'll make the optimal play so that we don't get burned later on. And if this is the end of the video, then so be it. Testing the Dimir player for counter magic as well. But he seems to be auto-yielded through his turns, so we'll assume he doesn't have any. Alright, so successfully wiping the board. And yeah, that player scoops, doesn't fancy replaying his board again. Okay, draw into a counter spell off the top there in Arcane Denial. We'll play out the Reliquary Tower, seeing as how we're going to have a hell of a lot of cards available to us. Now let's tap that down for mana straight away into a Soul Ring. Now our opponent's holding up priority, which could be telling. Play out the Mana Crypt as well. And then both of those can be tapped down into Machine God's Effigy. So we'll get a third copy of the Talion. And we'll name 1 this time, so we've got 1, 2 and 3 covered. Then we'll get down a Dimir's Signet as well. Yep, our opponent's scooping there as well. This is even before the Windfall. So Dimir's Signet into play. That's Cyclonic Rift for you. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to go for the Windfall now, just in an attempt to actually get a game out of it. Yeah, we'll just assume that our opponent would have scooped to having to discard his entire hand to a Windfall. We'll get down this Liliana, seeing as how we've just wiped the board successfully. And this will allow us to hold up the Arcane Denial as well. So we'll tick that up, gain 1 life, and look at the top 3. And there we see... are we going to regret getting rid of Feed the Swarm? I think we might, so let's go for that. One of our only means of enchantment removal. And we'll play around the fact that we're not going to see haste, so we'll land 9 damage on our opponent here. Haven't managed to drain him down too well. But hopefully next turn, if we get into the Sir Conrad the Grim, which I said I was going to do, that will start to ping our opponent down nicely. Yeah, a lot of it's off the back of our opponent forgetting about the Notion Thief, really. He was struggling there and then managed to maybe get back into the game if it wasn't for the Notion Thief. Luckily we had Swiftfoot Boots on there to protect against such things. Speaking of which, Rapid Hybridization now going on to the Talion. So we'll draw a card. I'm not going to counter this. We're not worried about saving ourselves from Legendary with the Sakashima. It's literally just a clone effect. Oh wow, really? And does this count towards the Legendary rule? Yeah, maybe I am wrong. Is the Legendary rule... I thought it just looked at the same permanence. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Does the Legendary rule look at the same permanence with the same names that are Legendary? I thought that if this isn't a creature, even though it's a Legendary with the same name, because it's not a creature, it won't go down to the Legend rule, but I've probably put something up on the screen already to explain it. Maybe we do need to go for the whole mirror box thing after all. Soul Ring coming into play again. Our opponent playing it out nicely. Well, Nezahal, Primal Tide won't do it for him as long as the Notion Thief's in play. Is this another time that our opponent's forgetting about Notion Thief? Playing Quest for Ula's Temple into that. And if we don't have to play the Arcane Denial here, then there's no need not to get down the Orcish Bowmasters. The first time I've been able to play this card, but unfortunately it's not going to do a whole lot whilst our opponent can't draw any additional cards. We will ping him with the Bowmasters though. Obviously we could have Professor Onyx make our opponent sacrifice the Nezahal. I think we should be able to get him without doing that though. Draw into Sig, River Cutthroat, which is some card draw and means of further drain on our opponent. So the Psychosis Crawler not going to do a whole lot with regards to its triggered ability, thanks to the fact that our opponent can't draw cards, like I said, but it is still a 14-14, although it's going to go down in power and toughness as we play ourselves a Lightning Greaves here, because we do want to give it haste so that it can swing in. Our opponent draws a card, which means we draw a card. So Lightning Greaves onto the Psychosis Crawler, and there's another one, Imposter Mech. We'll draw another card to the Nezahal, and that is a Bloodchief Ascension, finally starting to get into more of the drain effects here. Psychosis Crawler still triggers on our opponent, because it triggers on us drawing a card. Going to copy the Nezahal, and obviously we're more than happy to have our opponent draw cards to the Nezahal, because it means that Notion Thief will draw more. So now let's swing in before I play any more cards. We'll go for the Psychosis Crawler. And then we've got a Flying Talion as well. Should really have ticked down the Professor Onyx and had our opponent sacrifice that there. Alright, so let's get down the Bloodchief Ascension. And we'll play ourselves a Sig at River Cutthroat as well. Where's that at the end here? And we'll go for Windfall, put our opponent out of his misery here because we're going to ping our opponent a lot with the Psychosis Crawler. Loses a life for each card we draw. Gets drained for 2 from the Professor Onyx because that is a sorcery. And this does mean that we're not holding up counter magic, but our opponent's also going to have no cards in hand. So if he gets into a board wipe straight off the top, then so be it. We end up with 20 cards in our hand. And a hell of a lot of Psychosis Crawler triggers. Again, didn't manage to draw into any free counter magic for protecting ourselves, so our opponent does have a chance. Alright, and taking our opponent down to 1 with no cards in hand. Bloodchief Ascension gets its first counter. Sig will draw us a card because our opponent certainly lost a chunk of life there. So we draw a card to the Sig, triggers the Psychosis Crawler, and our opponent goes down to 0. So, like I said, it is a bleed effect type deck and there is some draw pain and stuff like that in here. But really, the most valuable card of this game was the Notion Thief. Really transformed the game, our opponent playing into that, and then we were obviously able to do the same towards the end there. Hopefully you all enjoyed this revisit to Talia, this time in the multiplayer room. If you'd like to see more from it, then let me know as ever. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.